Hey guys, tonight we journey into the heart of the ancient Persian Empire, not through fire or conquest, but through something far cooler. Literally, you're about to follow the path of snowflakes that somehow survived desert summers and turned into royal wine chillers. Yep, we're talking about how the ancient Persians figured out a way to keep their drinks cold in a place that regularly fries eggs on rocks. You'll follow the workers who fetched ice from the highlands, crawl into freezing underground chambers, and eavesdrop on high priests debating whether iced wine was a crime against nature. It's history, but with frostbite. You probably won't survive this without some kind of jacket, or a time travel-proof Yeti cooler. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through a blinding glare of white snow. Not in winter, but high in the Zagros Mountains. It's midsummer down in the plains, but here, your breath fogs. You're bundled in wool that itches like betrayal, and your boots crunch through ankle-deep drifts. Around you, men shout in Old Persian, hacking at the snowpack with primitive but shockingly efficient tools. Wide-bladed shovels, stone-carved scoops, baskets lined with reeds. One of them, let's call him Darius, because they're all somehow named Darius, grins at you with chapped lips and says, "Better this than threshing barley in Persepolis, eh?" You nod, shivering. You're here for the same reason they are, hauling tons of snow down 3,000 meters of steep, craggy mountain trails before it melts. Why? Because King Darius likes his wine slightly chilled. Let that sink in. You're risking frostbite and wolf attacks because some royal guy in golden sandals can't handle room temperature Shiraz. The journey starts before dawn. The team camps near a cave that locals say belongs to the Ice Djinn, a snow spirit with the voice of a thunderstorm and the manners of a cat with a migraine. Just a legend, probably. Still, no one sleeps near the mouth of that cave. You pack the snow tight into reed baskets, then into bigger goatskin sacks. The trick is speed. The longer it takes to descend, the more water seeps out. The ice runners lash sleds together, strap them to mules, and then it's hours of slippery switchbacks. You're told not to fall behind because mountain leopards find stragglers crunchy on the outside and chewy in the middle. By noon, your face is sunburned, but your chest is still cold. A contradiction you're getting used to. As the landscape shifts from frostbite-inducing peaks to rocky valleys, you pass a line of acacia trees, bent by wind, scorched by sun, but still clinging on. Just like the ice, which is now cocooned in layers of straw and wrapped with damp wool cloth. You reach the mid-station, a caravanserai run by a man whose beard looks like it could tell stories. He checks your ice, weighs it with practiced hands, and nods. "Good load," he says. "Still has bite. That's the goal. Not just any snow, but ice that bites. The kind that makes wine shiver. And your job's not over yet. Next comes the crossing of the Dasht-e-Kavir, a brutal desert where the sun doesn't shine. It attacks. And it's in this heat that you start to grasp how insane this whole thing is. Transporting ice through a desert. No refrigeration, no magic. Just sheer engineering and a bit of madness. Every few miles, you stop at shade wells. Deep pits lined with rock and brick capped with thatched lids. Inside, nothing but blessed, life-saving coolness. It's not enough to keep the ice frozen, but it slows the melt. You rotate out the outer layers of insulation, toss the soaking straw, and replace it with fresh, dry material. The mule drivers chant as they work, partly for rhythm, partly to scare off snakes, probably also to stay sane. you reach the final destination, a narrow canyon with towering walls that cast long shadows. There's a structure ahead, half dug into the earth. It looks like a forgotten tomb. But it's not death that lives here. It's preservation. The entrance is small, but inside, it's a cathedral of chill. This is one of the oldest ice pits in Persia, dug by hand, lined with stone and sealed with ancient lime plaster. It smells faintly of wet clay and freezing ambition. You help lower the ice into the chamber. Workers line the bottom with crushed date leaves. Why? No one really knows. Tradition, they say. You wonder if the leaves somehow whisper to the cold, asking it to stay a little longer. The ice is stacked, layer by layer with insulation between, then sealed again. It will sit here for weeks, until the royal court arrives and demands cool refreshments while watching wrestlers covered in ollie. You rest against the cool wall. The silence is deep, broken only by a drip. Somewhere, the ice is weeping. You might too, if you had to haul another load tomorrow. One older man pats your shoulder and says, This is what separates us from the barbarians. You want to say, pretty sure they're just fine with warm beer, but he's already hobbling away, humming. You climb out, the hot sun like a slap after hours, underground, and you wonder, who figured this out first? Who thought, let's bring winter to the desert? There are no records of the first Persian to try it, but historians agree it was already common by the time of Cyrus the Great. That's the 6th century BCE. For those of you who didn't cheat on your ancient history final, some say it was inspired by earlier Mesopotamian snow storage techniques. Others argue it was totally homegrown, a proud Persian innovation. Historians still argue whether this practice was born from practicality or pomp. Was it medical? Hot weather makes tempers flare, maybe cold drinks calmed nerves. Or was it just a royal flex? Either way, it worked. And over the next weeks, you see it working. At court as wine flows, and dancers spin in flowing robes. Servants appear with bronze jugs cooled with meltwater. Nobles murmur their approval. The king raises a chilled cup and says, "It tastes like mountain breath." Everyone nods. No one knows what that means, but it sounds regal. You, meanwhile, get assigned a slightly less glamorous role, hauling melted ice water to scrub the bathhouse tiles. Still, when the sun blazes overhead and the world feels like a kiln, you sneak into the pit again, just for a moment, just to touch the cold. And you smile, because you help trap winter in a hole, and tomorrow you'll help bury it deeper. You wake to the sound of hooves and the creak of wooden wheels. Already the sun is lighting the hills with that dry golden fire only Persia knows how to make. Your arms ache from yesterday's descent, but there's no rest. Today you don't climb mountains, you go underground. The pit you filled yesterday? That was just one of dozens, all across the empire. These hidden vaults dot the landscape like forgotten secrets. You're heading toward a different kind of structure now, one built not into the side of a mountain, but beneath the beating heart of a desert plain. It's called a yakhchal, literally a ice pit, but the name undersells the genius. You reach the site after a long, dusty ride. It looks like a massive clay beehive rising out of the sand, 30 feet tall, sloping inward like the world's most serious teacup. You stare up at it. It looks ancient. Which of course it is. Inside, the air changes, drops a full 10 degrees the moment you step through the thick mud brick walls. You exhale in surprise. The guide beside you chuckles, tapping the wall with his knuckles. 6 layers of adobe, mixed with camel hair. Sun can knock, but it doesn't come in. You're led down a narrow ramp spiraling into the earth. At the bottom, it's properly cold. The air tastes like limestone and earth, and the walls sweat very slightly. Condensation clinging to the curves of genius engineering. This isn't just a hole, it's a refrigeration system designed to defy physics and humidity. The Persians figured out how to keep ice frozen all summer long under a desert sun. No electricity, no incantations. Just a few thousand years of quietly outsmarting nature. The system works like this. In the winter, workers collect snow and ice, just like you did. They haul it to the yakhchal and dump it in layers. Ice, insulation, more ice. Then the top is sealed shut with wooden boards and covered with lime plaster. But that's not even the clever part. See, the entire pit is connected to underground air tunnels, badgirs, which funnel cool wind through the chamber and push hot air up and out through the top. A passive ventilation miracle. You feel the faint breeze even now, swirling in slow, deliberate currents. The yakhchal breathes, almost like it's alive. You crouch beside the ice block at the base. It's faintly glowing in the filtered light, translucent, humming with cold energy. You touch it. Your fingers sting. It's real. Still frozen. And it's been here for months. You stay low, letting the chill wrap around your legs like a welcome fog, and your mind drifts to logistics. Because this isn't just a marvel of design. It's part of an entire infrastructure. Across the empire, a web of yakhchals supports the wine culture of the elite. The city of Yazd especially has them everywhere, like frost freckles on the sunburnt skin of the city. Yazd is a jewel in the desert, hotter than Hades' armpit, but somehow thriving. You walk its narrow alleys, past clay brick walls and domes the colour of baked bread. At every corner, someone's selling something. Carpets, dried fruits, water in copper jugs that clink like wind chimes when handled right. But it's the ice that makes it magical. Every noble home here has a small cooler, a miniature ice pit or stone basin, lined with tiles and packed with shavings from the public yakhchals. The children call it summer snow. The adults just call it a necessity. You watch as a servant cracks a hunk of ice into a copper bowl of pomegranate syrup. It sizzles, then clouds. The drink turns rosy and misted, like it's blushing from the cold. You're handed one. You sip. It makes your teeth hurt, but your heart do a little dance. Of course, the peasants don't get this luxury. Most people never even see a yakhchal from the inside. It's royal tech. But when the temple priests start distributing chilled rose water during midsummer rituals, even the common folk know what a miracle it is. You wonder how much of this survives. If hundreds of years from now, someone will find these structures and guess at their purpose. Will they think it was some sort of tomb? Or maybe a cult center? Historians still debate whether the yakhchals had any spiritual meaning. Some early texts hint at rituals being held near them, offerings laid at their vents. But to you, they're not just cold storage. They're proof that humans hate warm wine more than they fear the laws of nature. As you make your way back up the spiral ramp, the desert air slaps you again. You sweat almost immediately. You crave the cold. And now you understand what a luxury it is, what lengths people will go to for it. That night, you help oversee a burial. Not of a person, but of another load of ice. The process is almost reverent. Straw laid gently, ice passed from hand to hand. The youngest boy, maybe 7, presses his ear to a block and giggles. "I hear the mountains still," he says. You believe him. You sleep under the stars that night, the yakhchal glowing faintly behind you in the moonlight. You dream of snowflakes trapped in jars, of chill dates passed around a fire, of entire cities whispering to the cold. In the morning, you find a puddle where your water skin used to be. The sun's already up, but the pit, still cold, still waiting. And so are you, for the next delivery, because the snow doesn't move itself. And Darius, bless his silk-wrapped feet, hates lukewarm wine. You're deep in the wine cellars of Persepolis now, walls carved from stone so smooth they reflect torchlight like wet ink. And you're trying not to trip over your own sandals, because down here, everything is chilled. You'd think the king's wine cellar would be lined with gold. Nope. Just clay jars. Hundreds of them, each sealed with pitch and tied with reed rope, arranged by type, region, and probably how likely they are to make you dance like a goat on your third cup. You wipe sweat from your neck and kneel beside one labelled with a painted falcon, Falavision vintage, prized for its earthy notes and tendency to warm the blood. Which is ironic, since it's been stored underground at a temperature that could give a goose the chills. You're not here to taste. You're here to help prepare tonight's court feast, and that means, yes, again, fetching ice. Because this isn't just about preservation anymore, it's about presentation. In ancient Persia, chilled wine wasn't just a flex, it was a statement. You walk through the servants' corridor, passing rooms stacked with linen, spices, and bundles of mint, meant to be crushed into pitchers of water cooled with mountain ice. You pass a cook barking orders while simultaneously stuffing pomegranates with walnuts. A musician tuning a harp sighs, "I swear the strings go limp in this heat." And a guard wipes his brow with the disgust of a man who regrets leather armor in summer. Everyone's cranky, except the wine master. He's ancient, probably predates the cellars themselves. His beard is stained dark at the tips from constant sipping, and he calls the amphorae his children. He taps one gently, listens for a hollow tone. "This one's ready for chilling," he says, pointing with a cracked fingernail. "Pour it into the bronze pitcher, then pack it in shavings, not chunks. Shavings. We're not savages." You obey, and within minutes the wine begins to glisten with condensation. The pitcher itself darkens, weeping with cold. The air smells faintly of thyme and fermentation. The wine master closes his eyes. "That," he says, "that's the sigh of a good vintage relaxing." You snort softly. He opens one eye. "What?" "Nothing. Just wondering if wine sighs before or after you drink it." He grins, and you almost don't get smacked with a ladle. At the feast that evening, everything gleams. Lanterns shimmer against polished stone columns. Peacocks wander through the gardens like they own the place. Which, let's be honest, they kind of do. And chilled wine, it flows like gossip. You stand in the shadows, watching as nobles nod in approval at the taste. Musicians play softly in the background, and dancers move like wind across silk. A priest of Ahura Mazda murmurs a blessing over a tray of honey cakes cooled with mint leaves. And then the king raises his goblet. It's frosted. It catches the torchlight. He takes a sip. "Cool," he says simply, "like the breath of Mithra." Everyone claps. The metaphor? A little dramatic. But hey, it's royalty. You notice something odd, though. There's a group of Greek envoys seated near the far end of the table. They're not drinking. One of them, younger, curious, leans toward an elder who looks more leather than man. "Why don't we cool our wine like this?" he asks in Greek. The elder grimaces. "Because we're civilized, we dilute with water. Ice. It clouds the wine. Makes it blunt, like trying to sharpen a blade with butter." And just like that, you're caught in a quiet war. See, not everyone agrees on this whole cold wine is good wine thing. Historians still argue whether the Persian obsession with chilling drinks came from true innovation or from stubborn pride. Some ancient critics claimed the cold numbed the tongue. Others said it dulled the wine's soul. But here, tonight, the crowd is loving it. Even the skeptical Greeks eventually sip. And while they pretend not to enjoy it, you catch one muttering, "Not awful." Back in the storage quarters later that night, you see something that cements your respect for Persian over-engineering. It's a transport crate, unlike any you've seen. A double-walled box lined with wax cloth, stuffed with straw and date palm fibre, sealed with clay. The merchant beside it grins like a man who's just invented indoor plumbing. Keeps the inside cool for 3 days, he boasts, even if you drag it through the salt desert. Inside is a jug, bronze, engraved, and cold to the touch. The merchant plans to send it to the satrap of Bactria, which is weeks away. You ask him if it'll survive, he just shrugs. That's why we send two. You're starting to realize just how far this obsession goes. It's not just for feasts. The military uses ice to treat heat stroke. Temples chill holy water for purification rituals. Some nobles even bathe in melted snow scented with myrrh, claiming it tightens the skin and scares away evil spirits. Mostly it just causes goosebumps and a lot of screaming. You help prepare another crate for shipment. Inside goes a jug of honeyed wine, wrapped in linen soaked in rose water, then ice, then sawdust, then a spell scrawled on parchment. "Just in case," says the packer. You don't ask what kind of spell, you just lift the lid. The next morning the cart is gone, rolling eastward, the crate leaving behind only a puddle shaped like a question mark. That night, you find yourself back in the wine cellar. The wine master is asleep, snoring against a barrel. You sit beside the amphory, listening to the slow drip of condensation. You wonder what future generations will think when they find these pits and jars. If they'll think you were mad. Or just really, really committed to the perfect glass of wine. Either way, the ice still holds. The sun has barely nudged over the mountains, but the desert is already shimmering. You squint through the heat haze as a caravan ambles toward you. Dozens of camels, each stacked high with bundled rugs, crates of dried apricots, and most importantly, ice. Not just any ice. Tax ice. Yes, you heard that right. In ancient Persia, ice wasn't just a luxury, it was an economic commodity, just like grain, wine, and silk. And today, you're helping process an inventory for the royal records. The moment the caravan leader dismounts, he slaps the back of a nearby crate. "Yak from the Elburz peaks," he grunts. "Still solid. Want proof?" He cracks the seal, and a puff of frigid air brushes your cheek like winter remembering your name. Inside a single block, nested in straw and wool, glistening with slow defiance. You reach out and touch it. Still hard, still cold. He grins. "Told ya. Only lost one block this week. Damn camel sneezed on it." You log the delivery in a wax tablet. 2 blocks for the governor's court, 1 for the city temple, 1 for the physician's quarters, and 2 more, tucked away in a special crate marked with the winged symbol of Ahura Mazda. Those are going straight to Persepolis, ice as tribute. Turns out, the Achaemenid Empire didn't just hoard gold and spices, they demanded the cold. Governors in the north, where snow was plentiful, were expected to send regular deliveries to the southern provinces, especially during festivals. It was a way to flaunt control over geography itself. You may live under the desert sun, but you drink as if you're on a mountaintop. Of course, it's not all ceremonial. There's real bureaucracy behind it. You help a scribe count seals, double-check delivery routes, and calculate spoilage loss. Every degree matters. If the crate arrives even a day late, the block inside may be half gone, and someone gets fined. You're ushered into a chilly room lined with clay shelves and full of clay tablets, each one etched with ice records. Date of collection, volume, melt percentage, storage pit number, recipient. It's an accountant's dream or a fever nightmare depending on how you feel about spreadsheets written in cuneiform. Here's a fun one. One tablet shows a tax exemption granted to a village whose entire ice harvest was stolen by mountain bandits. Another tablet logs a special reward for a runner who managed to deliver an ice silk bundle to Babylon in just 5 days, breaking a record and several toes. The scribes chuckle when you ask how they keep track of melted inventory. We weigh the puddles, one deadpans. Then we cry. Still, it's serious business. Spoiled shipments can delay temple ceremonies, ruin medical treatments, and, worst of all, leave nobles with warm wine. That, more than anything, is apparently a punishable offence. You take a ride out to one of the ice storage checkpoints, halfway between the mountains and the capital, where fresh shipments are offloaded and repacked for maximum preservation. It's an organised chaos of shouting porters, sweating oxen, and endless clay jugs being dipped into shallow, icy trenches to cool. One woman oversees it all with terrifying calm. She's known as the Ice Matron, and she carries a cane she uses more for swatting lazy workers than walking. Timing is everything, she tells you. You delay 5 minutes, you lose 10 hours of melt time. Precision is cold currency. She shows you a diagram scratched into clay. It's a logistics map. Routes, distances, stops, elevation changes, wind direction. Every leg of the journey calculated for temperature drop. You blink at it. This is like warfare, you murmur. She nods. You fight heat with planning. Later, over lunch, she casually mentions a failed shipment to Susa. Too hot. Half the shipment melted. We fed the rest to the camels. You choke on your lentils. Camels eat ice? They love it. It's like date candy to them. This leads to a moment of quiet contemplation. Somewhere in the empire, there's probably a camel with the most luxurious digestive system known to man. By afternoon, you're watching a group of scribes argue over unit measurement for ice. One wants to count by volume, another by weight. A third just shouts, by number of drinks it chills, until someone throws a fig at him. Historians still debate how the Persians standardized these coal taxes. Some tablets contradict each other, while others reference local custom, which, as you've learned, is just ancient bureaucratic code, for we made it up on the spot. And yet, the system works, mostly. You help finalize a shipment for a noble wedding. 3 amphorae of spiced white wine, 6 blocks of ice, 4 trays of saffron-dusted melon. The merchant insists on sending a slave boy whose only job is to fan the cargo. You don't ask what he's paid. You just hand him a handful of figs and a sympathetic nod. That night, the ice matron offers you a cup of chilled barley drink, slightly fermented and shockingly refreshing. She raises it in toast. To cold taxes, she says, and warm bribes. You drink. It tastes like snow dreams and sunburnt rebellion. You wake to a low rumble that isn't thunder. It's a caravan arriving late. Well past nightfall, wheels crunching over gravel, camels groaning like philosophers with hernias. You squint into the torchlight and realize this shipment's different. No crates, no reed-wrap bundles. Just one massive cylinder hauled on a sledge lined with oil-soaked felt, escorted by 3 guards and 1 very smug engineer. It's a prototype, he says before you can ask. Sealed chamber, dual insulation, can hold 2 blocks for 10 days, maybe 12 if you don't open it. You circle the thing. It looks like a cross between a grain silo and a treasure chest. What's inside? He beams. A gift. For the Queen's birthday. You raise a brow. And the gift is cold? No, he says. The gift is sorbet. Wait, hold on. Sorbet? Yes. It turns out ancient Persians didn't just use ice for wine or cooling figs. They began experimenting with chilled desserts. Long before Italy thought of gelato, or France even knew what a pastry was. The engineer pries, opens the lid and reveals a bronze bowl nestled inside, surrounded by salt and packed snow. You peer in. It's a purplish paste, grape must mixed with honey and something else. Crushed violets, he says proudly, and a whisper of cardamom. You lean closer. It smells divine. You steal a taste. It hurts. Your tongue feels like it's been stabbed with a lavender icicle. You cough, then grin. It's delicious. The engineer sighs. No one ever says that on the first bite. But wait until the second. You do. And this time, the cold doesn't shock. It melts. Sweet. Floral. With a faint echo of snow. Suddenly it makes sense why someone would drag this halfway across the desert. Because it's magic. You ask how they made it. He shrugs. Same way you make war. Layer by layer. With patience and cursing. But he explains anyway. Step 1. Boil the must and spices down into a syrup. Step 2. Let it cool. Step 3. Pour it into a shallow dish. Then place that dish inside a larger basin filled with snow and salt. Stir constantly until it begins to firm. Step 4. Pray it doesn't melt. Step 5. Serve it before the nobles start yelling about room temperature. You follow him to the royal kitchens, where the sorbet will be presented with ceremony, set in a gold-rimmed dish atop a bed of rose petals. There's a group of servants fanning the bowl, as if it's a sacred relic. One of them mutters, "It's prettier than my wife." The head cook snaps, "And just as expensive." You're then handed a list of other frozen delicacies being prepped for the event. Chilled rosewater jelly, pomegranate slush thickened with ground almonds, even snow-cooled cucumbers stuffed with honeyed cheese, which sounds like a bad idea until you try one and suddenly want to kiss a glacier. But dessert isn't the only place this icy obsession shows up. Later that week, you're invited to observe a medical treatment. A young noble lies on a cushioned mat, pale and feverish. The healer, calm as a cat, unwraps a linen pouch of crushed ice and places it gently on the boy's chest. You expect the patient to flinch. Instead, he exhales. Slowly. The colour begins to return to his cheeks. The healer glances at you. The cold chases out the heat demons, he says. You nod, because arguing with a man holding crocodile oil poultices isn't your idea of a productive afternoon. They also use ice to numb wounds before surgery. A soldier with a dislocated shoulder gets a compress packed around the joint. He grimaces, then sighs, then passes out. You're told it's a good sign, and you see jars of snow melt being used in cosmetics. One noblewoman insists it makes her cheeks glow like moonlight. You suspect that might be the crushed pearl powder talking, but the point stands. Ice equals elegance. There's even a theory that mountain snow carries spiritual purity. A Zoroastrian priest describes how melted ice is used to purify sacred instruments, to cleanse rooms before birth rituals, and to make a rare offering drink, hauma chilled over ash bark, meant to invite the breath of righteousness. You try it. It tastes like celery mixed with snow and personal regret. But, hey, if it brings good fortune, who are you to judge? Later, walking through the market, you spot a curious sight. A street vendor selling mini ice treats to children. He carries a clay pot packed with snow, into which he dips small cups filled with dates, yogurt, and herbs. Kids squeal as they taste the cold. One tries to throw his cup at a pigeon, Misses, pigeon lives. You ask the vendor how he keeps the ice from melting. He taps his turban. I trade fig jam for snow with mountain tribes, he whispers. Then I ride like demons are chasing me. Turns out, the real secret ingredient is panic. That evening, you join a quiet rooftop gathering. Musicians play soft notes on a setar. A tray of frozen melon is passed around, slices so cold they fog the air. Stars blink overhead. The city below flickers with lamps. Someone raises a cup. To Persia, they say. Someone else adds, to ice. And someone, maybe you, says, to the mad genius who first decided to freeze grapes and call it dessert. Everyone laughs. You lean back, melon slice in hand, and think, maybe civilization doesn't start with fire, but with ice. You're halfway down a narrow mountain trail, and your knees are already protesting. The air is thin, crisp, and smells like juniper and goat. Below you, Persia stretches out like a carpet of sand and scrub. But up here, there's snow. So much snow, even in midsummer. A guide ahead waves for you to stop. We're here, he says. You stare. There's no building, no camp, just a strange dip in the ground, ringed by stones and sheltered by a low roof of woven reeds. A heavy wooden lid sits over it, sealed with mud and straw. This is it. A yakhchal, a literal ice pit, but also so much more than that. It's ancient Persia's architectural miracle, and you're about to see inside one. With a groan, the guide lifts the lid. Cold air rushes out, curling around your ankles. You peer in. Stone walls descend at an angle, narrowing down into a frosty funnel. The base is hidden in shadow, but you can already see the glimmer. Ice, still solid, still here, still surviving the brutal Persian summer. Welcome to the Empire's underground refrigerators. Yakhchals are genius by design. Each one is a massive conical structure, like a beehive turned upside down, made with a special water-resistant mortar called sarouj. Sand, clay, lime, egg whites, goat hair, and ash. Sounds like a witch's pantry, but it worked. The result? A material so strong it could last centuries and repel heat like a cranky sun god. Some yakhchals were above ground, tall and imposing, like frozen cathedrals. Others, like this one, were carved right into the mountainside, hidden from bandits and blessed with shade. All of them had one job: keep ice frozen all year long. You drop a pebble down into the pit. It takes 3 seconds to hit. This thing is deep. The guide chuckles. We pack ice in layers. Straw, ice, straw, ice. Trap the cold. You nod slowly. How old is this one? He grins. My great-great-grandfather was born on top of it. You climb down a makeshift ladder, each rung colder than the last. At the bottom, it's almost silent. Your breath fogs. You run your fingers along a wall of snow that's months old. No mold, no rot. Just snow, salt, and time. It's astonishing. Back up top, you're shown how they harvest the ice in the first place. In winter, shallow pools are dug into the earth near rivers. At night, the water freezes. At dawn, workers break the sheets into blocks and stack them on sleds. These are rushed to the yakhchals before the sun climbs too high. The faster they move, the more they preserve. The more they preserve, the more the city survives summer, with wine chilled to perfection. You watch a team perform the ritual now. Mud-caked boots, iron tongs, curses muttered in at least 3 dialects. They move like dancers in a well-rehearsed performance. Lift, wrap, lower, seal the lid, stamp the mark. Pray the summer stays merciful. You ask what happens if the snow runs out. The guide just shrugs. Then we drink warm beer and cry. Some things never change. Later, you visit one of the mega yakhchals near a royal estate. This one is enormous, 50 feet tall, wide enough to host a dinner party. It even has air vents built into the structure, allowing hot air to rise and cold air to settle. A primitive but brilliant form of convection cooling. You marvel at how this was engineered without modern tools, without thermometers, without anything but common sense and relentless trial and error. Historians still argue whether yakhchals were a Persian innovation or if they borrowed the idea from earlier Mesopotamian pit cooling systems. Either way, Persia perfected it. Inscriptions near one yakhchal mention an architect named Ardvan, who allegedly lost 3 toes to frostbite, but gained favour with the king after designing a yakhchal that preserved ice through 2 droughts. A mural nearby shows Ardvan holding a cup of snowmelt wine, grinning despite his extremely lopsided sandal. You visit a few more storage sites and start recognizing patterns. All are built with north-facing openings to avoid the sun. All use some version of that magical sarouj plaster, and most are tucked beside water channels, qanats, which help regulate temperature and moisture. And then you find one that's empty, not just melted, looted, charred straw, broken storage pots, scratched walls. Someone had raided it, likely in desperation. Perhaps during a drought, maybe during a war, or maybe just because cold melon is irresistible in July. You wonder what punishment awaits a man who steals state-sponsored snow. Probably nothing good. But not all yakhchals were about empire and taxes. Some were communal, shared by villagers who filled them together in winter and divided the ice come summer. You see one small pit beside a shrine. An old woman sits nearby, selling spiced chickpeas. You ask her if the ice still works. She laughs. Of course, but now we store pickles. Honestly, not a bad upgrade. By evening you find yourself at the entrance of an ice festival. Yes, they had those too. Locals gather to celebrate the first snow harvest of the year. Young boys race to haul blocks. Old men judge whose block melts slowest. There's a contest for the prettiest ice carving. A swan, a warrior, a goat with slightly too many legs. You sip sweet mulberry syrup chilled in snow and watch the mountains turn pink. Someone hands you a wax tablet. It's a poem carved by a merchant to commemorate the coldest block he ever sold. It ends with the line, "Beneath the fire sun, I held the mountain's breath." You smile, because now you've held it too. You're lying on a rooftop again, wrapped in a light linen shawl, when someone nudges your shoulder and hands you a letter sealed with beeswax. The script is elegant, unmistakably royal. "You've been summoned," the messenger says. "They want you to see something. Private." Your stomach drops. Private in Royal Persia usually means politics, punishment, or something involving eunuchs and tiger cubs. You arrive at the palace under moonlight. The guards recognize you now. You're the one who's always asking about cold things. One smirks and mutters, "Ice boy returns." Inside, the Queen's chief steward greets you with a bow and leads you through winding marble halls until you reach a dark wooden door. "Beyond this," he whispers, "you will see the future of imperial pleasure. No pressure." The door swings open. You gasp. It's a cooling chamber, not a yakhchal, not a cellar, but something new entirely. A man-made indoor refrigeration room, commissioned by the royal court to impress foreign dignitaries and irritate the Greeks. You step inside and immediately feel the chill. Not frigid, but definitely not summer. The air is drier, cleaner. The walls are coated in polished lime plaster and embedded with clay vessels. These vessels, the steward explains, are filled with ice, salt and camphor. A kind of ancient Persian air conditioning system. You walk slowly, touching the walls. Some hum with subtle vibration. Turns out, Qanat water flows beneath the floor, circulating coolness upward. Ingenious. In the center of the chamber, a wine table waits. Bronze cups. Fresh apricots. A jug beaded with condensation. This is Persia's answer to Athens's symposium. Not just drinking, but drinking in engineered comfort. One scholar nearby mutters, "The Greeks have thinkers, but we have chillers." You raise a cup and toast to whoever thought of that line. But it's not just for show. The court plans to replicate this system in select villas, starting with the homes of high priests, military governors, and whoever has the king's favour this week. You wonder aloud if such cooling could ever be used in places like temples or hospitals. A young architect overhears you and lights up. "We're trying." But the priests think it angers the fire spirits, and patients keep trying to eat the camphor. There's always a catch. Later, you're invited to the Ice Library, an archive of scrolls and tablets dedicated entirely to the storage, science, and philosophy of cold. You didn't think ice needed a philosophy, but here we are. One scroll is titled On the Paradoxes of the Frost. Another, Chill as Virtue, a Zoroastrian treatise. You're not sure if it's satire. One passage reads, "Heat is rash, cold is patient. To chill is to endure." Honestly? That slaps. You also discover records of cold weather diplomacy. Apparently, several peace talks were held inside yakhchals, a symbolic gesture that heat and conflict could be tamed by reason. Ice. Delegates were given iced rosewater and encouraged to speak only once their hands stopped shaking. You imagine a general trying to issue a threat while holding a cup of slush. Not very convincing. Some documents detail coal taxes, a levy placed on mountain tribes who harvested snow for the empire. In exchange, they were granted ice exemptions during wartime. No soldier could take their stored snow without payment. A rare and surprisingly progressive policy. You keep digging. There's a curious side note about a sect of cold monks, hermit priests who lived in mountain caves, bathing only in melted snow and believing that cold preserved not just food but truth. They believed that heat distorted perception and that only in freezing silence could one hear the voice of Ahura Mazda. Historians still debate if they existed or if someone made them up as a joke, says the archivist, winking. But they did have excellent skin. You exit the archive with your mind buzzing. Cold isn't just comfort, it's culture. That night, you return to your lodgings and find a group of children playing near a gutter. They've built a tiny canal to divert runoff from a qanat into a little clay trough. At the end of the trough, they've packed snow around small clay toys. They've created their own mini yakhchal, complete with thatched roof and a pebble gate. You ask what it is. "It's a temple," one girl says, "for the ice god." You blink. "There's an ice god?" The kids all nod solemnly. "He lives on the mountain and hates sandals." You try to argue, but they're already reenacting a ritual involving frozen raisins and a chant that sounds suspiciously like a sheep sneezing. You leave them to it. Who are you to deny a new religion? Next morning, you join a caravan headed east. Your goal? Visit one of the furthest outposts where Persian cooling tech was exported, to Bactria, beyond the empire's edge. Days pass. Dust stings your eyes. Water runs low. Then, like a mirage, you see it, a small village with stone ice pits, patterned after yakhchals but built with local materials. Brick, timber, even petrified wood. Inside one? Ice. Not much. Maybe a week's worth. But that means they did it. The Persian cold had travelled beyond Persia. A merchant explains that he learned the technique while trading in Persepolis. "My uncle married a woman whose cousin made sarouj," he says proudly. She showed us how to mix it. Then we just waited for winter. He shrugs. Now we store apricots. Life is good. You notice something else. These villagers don't just store ice, they trade it. Small blocks packed in oilcloths, exchanged for olives, linens, and strangely painted prayer stones. The chill, once a royal luxury, is now currency. You sip lukewarm tea and realize the Empire's real legacy isn't conquest. It's comfort, spread block by block, pit by pit, whisper by whisper. Cold has gone viral. And somewhere deep inside you, a part of you chills with pride. By now, you're walking like someone who's forgotten what warmth feels like, and loving it. You've tasted frozen grapes in desert palaces, slept beside blocks of ancient snow, and listened to priests preach about the sacred geometry of frost. But you're not done yet, because today you're travelling south, past the snow-fed mountains, through the arid plains, into the parched belly of the Persian plateau. You're following whispers of something even older than the yakhchals. They call it the Sleeping Cave. Locals point toward a barren ridge. No trees, no streams, just scorched rock and wind that feels like it could peel your lips off. You trudge up a path carved by goats and barefoot shepherds. And just when your skin starts to bake, you find it. A narrow crack in the mountain, barely wide enough to squeeze through. You do, of course. Inside it's dark. The heat cuts off abruptly. You can hear your heartbeat again. And then, cold. Not dramatic. Not freezing. Just noticeably cooler. The kind of cool that raises tiny bumps on your arms and makes sweat evaporate like magic. You light a torch. The cave stretches deeper than expected. Along the wall, shallow pits are carved, each about the size of a loaf of bread. Within one, you see a smear of white. Salt? Bone? You reach in. It's ice. Thin, almost translucent, but very much still solid. This, your guide whispers, is what the ancients used before the Empire formalized ice collection. A natural refrigeration pocket cooled by air circulation, shaded year-round and sealed by the mountain itself. These caves were the prototypes, not built, discovered, used by bandits, monks, shepherds, smugglers, and eventually by engineers who realized they could imitate nature, then improve it. You sit beside one of the older alcoves. Scratch marks suggest it was once sealed with clay. Maybe to keep animals out. Maybe to keep the treasure cold. A cup is buried in the sediment. You lift it. It's broken. Ceramic, the glaze long worn off. But when you turn it in your hands, you see something scratched onto the base. A swirl pattern. The symbol for cool breath. Even thousands of years ago, someone had a name for the cold. You return to the surface blinking, 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 and sweating again. To cool off, you take a detour to the canal district of a southern Persian city where underground water channels, quainats, form the lifeblood of everything. But you're not here for irrigation or hygiene. You're here because some clever soul realized that the water was cool enough to act as an entire city's refrigerator. You're led to a bakery. Yes, a bakery, but not one filled with warm bread. This one specializes in ice-cooled dough. The baker explains. In the hot months, yeast rises too fast, becomes sour. So, we cool the mixing room using qanat air. Makes better bread. You try a bite. It's light, fluffy, and somehow fresher than anything you've eaten above ground in weeks. Next door, a fruit seller using the same principle. His store is sunlit and dry, except the back room, where he stores cold dates and mint leaves in ceramic pots, cooled by qanat-fed evaporation jars. He calls them his invisible snowmen. You laugh. Then you stop. Because it's genius, there's no ice, no snow, but still cold. Later that day, you're invited to a tea house famous for serving what they call the Snow Prophet's Brew. Sounds dramatic, tastes better. Saffron, rose, mint, and cooled over snow that's been wrapped in layers of sheep wool and buried underground for 6 months. More flavour that way, the tea master insists, and fewer ants. You make a note. Snow storage equals ant control. Who knew? Even here in the hottest zones of the empire, people have bent every trick to chase coolness. Shade, underground tunnels, reflective paint, ice blocks, evaporative pots, and in one case a cat trained to guard stored melons. You visit him. He's smug and clearly aware of his importance. But not everything's a success story. One merchant shows you his failed invention, a wineskin fan. You wave it, and it's supposed to cool the wine inside. It doesn't. It just sloshes and occasionally leaks. I tried, he says. My wife told me to go sell lentils. You tell him he's ahead of his time. He beams. Back at the city gates, a mural catches your eye. A donkey is pulling a sled stacked with ice. The painting's old, the colour's faded, but the inscription below is still sharp. We carry the mountain to the desert. It hits you. That's what all of this is, the entire system. The kanats, the yakhchals, the snow pits, the rituals, the summer festivals. They're all part of this beautiful, stubborn, brilliantly irrational dream. To bring the mountain to the desert. To take what was fleeting and trap it. To say, we want to drink cold wine in July, and by Ahura Mazda, we will. You pause at the mural and look around. People are laughing, carrying baskets of cold pomegranates, sipping mulberry drinks that fog their copper cups, fanning themselves beside water flowing invisibly beneath their sandals. This isn't just innovation, it's identity. In the heart of the empire's heat, the cold isn't a novelty, it's Persian. You wake before dawn, in a tiny stone inn, miles from any city, just you. The chill of pre-sunlight air, and a soft hum from the kanat running beneath your floor. The owner claims this room was built precisely above the coldest stretch of the underground channel. Cools the soul, he says with a grin, handing you a fig wrapped in a grape leaf chilled overnight in clay. You eat it slowly. It tastes like a secret. Today you're headed for Persepolis, the empire's grand stage, built to dazzle dignitaries, humble foreign rulers, and occasionally make bureaucrats cry from sheer marble overload. But you're not here for the politics or the monuments. You're here because Persepolis has its own legend, the Royal Ice Symposium. You've seen references scrawled in trade documents, hinted at in servant gossip, and once overheard in a bathhouse by a man who smelled like date liquor and questionable wisdom. The symposium, as the story goes, wasn't just a feast. It was an experiment, a celebration of cold. A place where engineers, mystics, philosophers, and wine merchants gathered to one-up each other with icy inventions, most of which were brilliant, and some of which probably maimed their creators. It happened once a year, at the summer solstice. Because of course it did. By mid-morning, you're among the ruins. Massive columns, winged bulls, cuneiform, boasting. But your eyes scan past all that, searching for a specific courtyard. You find it behind a now collapsed hall, tucked between two lesser-known temples, the Court of Shadows. No official signs, but in the stone you find carved basins, drain channels, even a shallow fountain designed to spray a mist cooled by buried ice blocks. This was it. This was where the Royal Ice Symposium happened. A local guide arrives, puffing slightly. "You're late," he grins. "The wine's warm." You tell him you're here for ghosts. "Then follow me." He takes you through a series of underground chambers, Storage rooms, kitchens, a theatre of sorts. But one chamber stands out. Its ceiling low, its walls smooth, and its floor lined with deep holes. Each one's held a ceramic pot, packed with snow, salt, or frozen fruit. A sign near the entrance calls it the Cold Logic Chamber. You imagine it. Scholars pacing in damp sandals, arguing over thermal transfer and humidity ratios. A man in a silk robe yelling, "You fool! You can't mix camphor with rose water unless it's already frozen." One tablet you find, miraculously intact, details a contest. Each team had to create a chilled wine delivery method, from yakhchal to cup, with no more than one assistant and one donkey. Points were awarded for temperature, speed, flavour, and theatrical flair. The winner that year? A duo who coated their donkey in reflective silver paint, strapped clay pipes along its sides, and ran melt water through the system from a bag of snow hidden in the saddle. The final touch? The donkey brayed on cue, causing a flap to open and pour perfectly chilled wine into a carved horn. Historians still debate if this actually happened or if it was just an early form of Persian stand-up comedy. Your guide says, either way, it's genius. Later, you're shown an old diagram, drawn in charcoal and pomegranate juice, of a portable cooling seat. It was designed for elderly viziers who found the summers unbearable. Hollowed stone with melted snow fed through internal channels. Some versions even had a foot bath and cooled armrests. You touch the cracked remains of one. The stone still hums with remembered chill. In the archive room, you discover what might be the earliest known cold chain logistics chart. Arrows, storage nodes, seasonal schedules for harvesting snow and routing it through relay stations to reach cities in under 3 days. It's mesmerizing. At one point, the scribe added a note: no deliveries during sandstorms. Camels get grumpy. You're falling in love with this empire all over again. But the symposium wasn't just about wine and snow. It had a philosophical angle, too. You find an essay titled On the Moral Implications of Ice. It argues that seeking cold in heat is an act of human defiance but also of reverence, that to shape nature without breaking it is the highest form of intelligence. You sit with that for a moment. Is the cold a conquest or a compromise? Another scroll describes a failed performance at one symposium. A poet tried to recite verses while standing inside a shallow basin filled with melted snow and mint oil. He slipped, fell, lost 2 teeth. The poem was reportedly awful anyway. Your favourite find? A letter from a noblewoman to her sister, describing a new dessert served at the event. They took pomegranate syrup, froze it in fine snow, and shaped it into flowers. It melted too fast. But while it lasted, it was like eating winter. You know exactly what she means. Before you leave Persepolis, the guide takes you to one last place. A long-forgotten tunnel beneath the royal gardens. Here, aristocrats once strolled while chilled water ran through copper pipes embedded in the walls, cooling the air. Some scholars claim it's the world's first attempt at indoor climate control. Others say it was just a fancy drain system. You breathe in the air, still cooler than outside, and decide to believe the first group. On your way out, you spot a half-erased carving, a hand holding a snowflake. Not a symbol of wealth, not even power. Just something delicate, something fleeting, something someone wanted to remember. By now, you've walked the frozen corridors of Persia's imagination, felt the ghost of snow underfoot, shared mint-soaked sorbet with the dead, and learned that even donkeys once wore silver to chill a cup of wine. But your journey isn't finished, not yet, because today you're climbing back into the mountains. but not to the icy north. No, this time you head east, toward the harsh dry winds of the Dasht e Lut, the so-called empty desert, toward a town where time folds differently, where the last true yakhchals are still in use. The locals call the place Sarvabad, which roughly translates to home of the enduring cypress, and like its namesake tree, the people here have roots that stretch impossibly deep. You arrive just as the sun crests the cliffs. It's already hot enough to bake figs on a saddle, but tucked into a curve of the valley, half shaded by stone and stubborn shrubs, you see it, a fully intact yakhchal, still in service, not a ruin, not a museum piece, a functioning, beloved, everyday tool. The caretaker is a boy no older than 12. His father and grandfather handle the deeper maintenance, but it's his job to wake the ice. That means clearing debris, brushing away dust, and tapping the outer dome with a wooden stick to listen for echo patterns. He says the ice sings differently when it's happy. You're inclined to believe him. He takes you inside. The temperature drops like a sigh. It's cavernous, cone-shaped, smells like whetstone, mint, and a trace of lemon peel. Snow is long gone by this season, but you see blocks of hard-packed ice stacked like precious bricks, still holding form after months. They're wrapped in straw and wool, sometimes even tucked in old rugs stitched with family crests. Above the ice sits a layer of fermented cherry syrup in sealed jars, kept cool to slow its sharpness, mellow the bite. The boy offers you a taste. It puckers your entire face. He laughs, says it gets better in winter. Then he gestures to something in the corner, a low platform of wood and stone, covered in layers of linen. You ask what it is. He grins. A wedding gift. Turns out, in Sarvabad, families still chill dowries. Not gold or silk, but flavours, aged yogurt, dried mulberries, rose-infused vinegar, all of it stored in the yakhchal until the couple's first summer, when the groom carries it, block by sweating block, to the bride's new home. You only love truly if you sweat for it, the boy recites. You step outside and find his grandfather mending the outer plaster, a mixture of sand, lime, ash and goat hair, smoothed with a walnut shell. He doesn't speak much, but he hands you a shard of ancient ceramic, says it belonged to the first yakhchal in this valley. On it is a mark, a mountain with a droplet falling from its peak, a symbol of ice being born. That night, you sleep under stars so sharp they seem to slice the sky into ribbons. But you're not in a tent or room. You're inside a summer guest yakhchal, used historically for dignitaries. They're only open twice a year, when the air outside is too hot to breathe and someone important is coming through. You're not sure how you qualify, but no one argues. Inside, the silence is absolute. A low hum from the cooling trench, the scent of aged clay and quince. The ceiling opens to the stars, just slightly, enough for air to move, enough for dreams to slip in. You dream of Persian engineers arguing about thermal insulation, with a level of seriousness usually reserved for royal marriages. You wake to laughter. Outside, a group of older women are cooking with ice, not just keeping things cold, actively using it as part of the recipe. You see a dish of eggplant slices, chilled until they lose their bitterness, then flash fried. You try one. It tastes like memory, smoky, soft, just a little defiant. One woman explains that her grandmother swore by ice-rested garlic, said it made the flavour bloom slowly, like a lazy tiger. You ask how often they use the yakhchal for food preparation. Only when we want the food to behave, she says with a wink. Later that afternoon, the local school invites you in. Yes, school. Because here, ice isn't just history, it's curriculum. Kids learn about thermal mass, insulation ratios, snow harvesting, logistics, all through hands-on experiments with their local yakhchal. The science teacher shows you a model dome they built from clay and chicken wire. It's impressively accurate. Then she points to a chart. Annual ice shrinkage rate. They're tracking it. Because yes, the ice is shrinking faster now. Winter's shorter, summer's longer, and fewer families climbing to the peaks to gather snow. It's harder now, she admits. But we teach them to love it anyway. In the village square, you see a mural in progress. Painted by kids, it features a massive yakhchal, wearing sunglasses, holding a cup of iced tea, and smiling with cartoonish confidence. The caption says, "Cool is who we are." You believe it. That night the town gathers for an annual tradition, the ice parade. It's not as dramatic as it sounds. No floats, no fireworks, just families walking slowly from the yakhchal to the main square, each carrying a small jar of chilled something. Mulberries, syrup, mint water, ice chips, even just cold air trapped in a sealed clay bell. They walk in silence until they reach the center, where they pour their chill into a communal basin, offering it up to the heat with a kind of quiet pride. Then the music starts. They dance barefoot on the sun-warmed stones, sipping cold things, laughing, letting the warmth win for now. But only for now. Because tomorrow, the boy will wake the ice again, and the mountain, in its distant, frozen stillness, will wait to be carved and carried once more. By now, your bones have memorized the rhythm of Persian cold. You've tasted ice aged like wine, traced the domes of ancient yakhchals, and watched small children carry coolness like a sacred story in a jar. But something still tugs at you, a question that refuses to melt away. You wonder, how did it all begin? Not the techniques or the architecture that you've explored, but the idea, the very notion that ice, gathered by hand, shaped by design, and hauled across the brutal sweep of desert, could be more than just survival, could be status, luxury, even identity, so you head west again. Not to a city or temple, but to a forgotten archive on the edge of the Zagros Mountains, tucked in a valley where the wind sounds like it remembers things. The guardian of this place isn't a scholar or a priest or even particularly interested in ice. He's a beekeeper, has been for 50 years, lives alone except for the bees and the books. You find him seated beneath a fig tree, sipping what looks suspiciously like mead over ice. He squints at you. "You want the cold records?" he says. "They're in the south stack, behind the funerary chants." Sure, naturally. Inside the stone-walled library there's no order, just stacks, scrolls, dust. But what you're looking for stands out, not because it's newer, but because it's wrapped in sealskin, the kind used to protect cargo on cold caravans. You peel it back, slowly. By now, the edges of reality have softened. You've sipped chilled wine beneath stone lions, traced wen patterns through forgotten towers, and tasted rose-water ice that once cooled the blood of kings. Still, you sense there's one more piece, something elusive, something hidden behind the glittering facades of empire. To find it, you go underground, literally. Your next stop lies beneath a desert town that doesn't appear on most modern maps. A hushed place where the sand swallows tire tracks in time. A place the locals call Zamani Sard, the cold ground. No welcome sign, just a battered road, a lone fig tree bent like a shrug, and a narrow path that descends into shadow. You follow it, step by careful step. Your feet echo on stone worn smooth by centuries. The air grows damp, musty, cooler, and your ears pick up a distant rhythmic drip, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. You've entered a Qanat network, one of the oldest subterranean water systems in human history. Imagine this: hand-dug tunnels stretching for miles, channeling snowmelt from the mountains to parched villages far below. They're neither glamorous nor fast, but they work. Some have worked for over 2,000 years without ever drying up. And here's the secret nobody really tells you. The Qanats weren't just for water. They were ice highways, not officially, not in royal records, but in practice? Absolutely. You run your hand along the tunnel wall. It's slick with condensation, cooled by air currents funneled through precisely angled shafts above. You pass an opening, just wide enough for a man to crouch and lift something from a small alcove. And inside that alcove, a ceramic jug, lined with hardened beeswax, packed with straw and cold brine. Still cold, still preserved, a whisper of forgotten logistics. In a side chamber, you meet someone unexpected, Layla, an archaeologist who's lived underground, literally for 6 months. She specializes in invisible technologies, systems so seamlessly integrated into the world that modern science barely registers them as innovations. She shows you her notes. Sketches of clay vessels designed with convex necks, meant to force rising heat out and draw cold air in. Diagrams of double-walled amphorae used to store grape juice in alternating layers of ice and salt. Even primitive dew catchers, slender, spiraled rods that trapped moisture from the night air, funneling it into hidden cisterns. People think these were just storage spaces, she says. But this was active engineering, a living machine built into the bones of the desert. Layla leads you deeper into the network, past torchlit chambers and chisel marks that haven't seen sunlight in 800 years. Then she stops, points upward. You look. Above you, carved into the ceiling, is something beautiful and bizarre. A map of constellations, done entirely in hammered copper and blackened clay. But it's not just a zodiac. It's an ice calendar, Layla whispers. They timed their harvests, not just crops, but ice collection, to the stars. Turns out, certain mountain passes held snow longer, depending on the alignment of constellations. The rise of Sirius, for example, marked the last viable collection day before spoilage began. Ice, you realize, wasn't just a substance. It was a season, a ritual. You walk on in silence. Eventually you emerge into a chamber larger than a cathedral and completely dark, until Layla flips a small switch and floods the space with a light from low-heat LED strips mounted along the base of the wall. The room gleams. It's a yakhchal, hidden beneath the earth, not domed, but inverted. The same conical shape, only built downward, carved into the limestone like a chilled inverted mountain. You can barely breathe. In the center of the chamber lies a stone platform, still streaked with ancient frost. Around it, channels designed for melted runoff, slope to catch water and redirect it back into the Qanat. A zero waste system, refreeze, repeat. This wasn't just about cold, it was about eternal cold, self-sustaining, recursive. A feedback loop of ice and silence. Layla walks to a carved bench and hands you something wrapped in oiled cloth. You open it. A preserved fruit tart, maybe 100 years old, maybe more. Not edible, but perfectly intact. Because it's been kept in this microclimate, at this precise humidity, for decades. You hold it like a relic. Because that's what it is. You sit in that chamber for a long time, saying nothing. And then finally, you ask the question that's been building all night. Why go to all this trouble? Layla doesn't answer right away. Then she says, because cold is clarity, it makes things sharper, slower, more aware. The Persians didn't want to just live well. They wanted to feel everything, and you can't do that in a haze of heat. And maybe she's right. You look around one last time. This inverted dome, this desert glacier, it's a cathedral without gods, just physics and devotion. You climb back up into the world, blinking against the dawn. The air above is warmer, but it tastes different now, cleaner. You listen and hear a faint gurgle. The Qanat still running, still cold, still keeping secrets. Back in the town, a small girl watches you as you pass. She holds a clay cup filled with what looks like crushed ice and syrup. You ask her gently, "Where'd you get that?" She points behind you, toward a vent in the ground where cool air spills out, faint and steady. "My grandpa says it's the cold breath of the ancestors," she says. You smile, trying not to tear up. And just like that, you understand. They didn't just engineer the cold, they enshrined it. It begins again with heat. A blazing, unapologetic noon spreads over the plains like a punishment. Somewhere far ahead, a donkey brays. A breeze rises, dry, metallic, and vanishes just as quickly, leaving behind the soft hiss of sun on sand. You shield your eyes. Your last destination lies over a cracked escarpment, at the end of a ravine so narrow it feels like a trap. A place so remote, even GPS throws up its hands. Your guide, an old man named Persa, with a walk like a tired metronome, stops beside a stone marker carved with only one word. Mehrab. Sun's altar. Parsa points downward. And so you descend again into a forgotten ravine where, rumor has it, the final piece of Persia's cold legacy sleeps. What you're about to find is neither grand nor majestic. It's quiet, unassuming. But, as with most ancient things, it doesn't care what you think of it. The path leads you to the remains of a forgotten orchard, ghostly rows of fig and pomegranate trees now reduced to twisted trunks. But even here, amidst collapse and desolation, the earth is cooler. You crouch, press your hand into the dirt, still damp. That's not natural in this heat. Parsa smiles, revealing 2 gold teeth and a wisdom that doesn't announce itself. "Look up," he says. You follow his finger. And there it is, the final trick, hiding in plain sight. A ventilation shaft, barely wider than a plate, rising from the earth at a sharp slant. From this angle it looks like a burrow, but when you approach and place your hand over it, you feel it. A soft exhale of cold, like a sigh from a buried glacier. Parsa nudges a rock aside to reveal a hatch. Beneath it, a spiral staircase hewn straight into the bedrock. "Don't worry," he says. "It won't collapse." You glance back at the sun, take a breath, and go under. The descent is brutal. No handrail. Just smooth stone and silence that feels heavier the deeper you go. You count your steps until counting becomes irrelevant. When you reach the bottom, your skin is goosebumped and your breath makes mist. Here, in this unmarked underground chamber, lies the most humble yakhchal of all. Not imperial, not temple-aligned, just practical. A dome, inverted and ribbed with slats of ancient cedar. Its floor layered with coarse salt and crushed obsidian, a method used to absorb ambient heat and reflect light away from the stored ice. But here's the kicker. There's no water source nearby, no Qanat, no stream. So how did they fill it? Parsa answers before you ask. "Snow," he says. "Only snow, carried from the Zagros range, before spring at night, wrapped in wool, one step at a time." You blink. It's over 70 kilometers. "Why?" you finally ask. He shrugs. "For weddings, for medicine, for dying fathers who wanted to taste winter one last time." And there it is, the answer in its rawest form. They didn't preserve ice because it was useful. They preserved it because it was beautiful. a rebellion against summer, a love letter to transience. You spend hours exploring the chamber. There are tally marks etched into a stone pillar, perhaps inventory, perhaps just boredom. You find charcoal sketches of carts and mules, and one eerie image of a child holding what looks like an icicle, her mouth open in a frozen gasp of joy. A slab of clay sits near the base, bearing a cracked inscription. Not in Elamite, not in Old Persian, in Middle Persian, the bridge language between empires. And it reads, "In the hottest moment I held a piece of sky." You sit down, no dramatic music, no booming narration, just silence and cold. Later, Paisa makes tea, strong, smoky, brewed over a small flame that flickers against the walls. He offers you a cup, then produces a small bowl from a pack slung over his shoulder. It's filled with ice chips, wrapped in cloth soaked in lemon water. He drops a few into the tea. "They did this too," he says, "in summer. Cold tea for long days." You take a sip. It doesn't just cool your mouth, it rewinds it. You taste mountains, effort, defiance. "Ice was a philosophy," you say aloud, surprising even yourself. Paisa laughs. "Ice was a promise," he replies, "that even in the hottest land, some things can still be soft." The next morning, as you prepare to leave, he hands you a small jar, rose syrup, thick and fragrant. "In case you find ice on the road," he says, "or want to remember that you did." You walk away with dust in your hair and cold in your chest. That night, back in a town with electricity and glass doors, you pour the syrup over a scoop of modern ice cream. Store-bought, processed, easy. But when you taste it, it's not the same, because now you've seen what it costs to keep something cold when the world demands heat. You've walked the paths, climbed the domes, spoken to ghosts and guardians. You've held the sky in your hands, and you'll never forget. You lie on your back now, somewhere between waking and sleep. The desert dust still clings to your shoes. Your nose tingles faintly with the scent of rose water and sun-warmed clay, and the memory of cold lingers, like a sigh at the base of your spine. But the journey's not quite over. There's one final story to tell. Not one place, not one dome, but a feeling, a legacy, a thread that runs from the deepest Qanat to the quiet hum of a modern refrigerator. You're back in the present day. You open a fridge door. A little light flicks on. Inside, water bottles, salad containers, some leftover pizza. Not exactly imperial fare. But there it is, cold, controlled, on demand. You barely think about it. But now, knowing what it cost, what it meant, can you ever truly see it the same? You close the door and walk outside. And slowly, you begin to notice how Persia's cold knowledge still echoes. Hidden in the bones of your city, tucked inside the architecture of the everyday. That apartment block, see the thick curved walls, painted white to reflect sun, inspired by yakhchals. That cooling system in the fancy restaurant, passive airflow drawn from shaded rooftops. Essentially a bagia. Just with a digital thermostat, you step into a museum. The exhibit on ancient Persian technology barely takes up one wall. A dusty mock-up of a wind catcher, a cracked clay pot labelled primitive ice storage. One child walks past it without stopping, but you stop, because you know. These weren't primitive. They were precise. They were not accidental. They were deliberate, artistic, and powered by logic that defied the raw violence of desert heat. Historians still argue whether Persia's ice technology spread west via conquest or trade, or whether the Greeks, the Romans, even the Chinese, came up with their own methods in parallel. But one truth hums beneath the debate. Persia mastered cold when the world burned. They pulled snow from mountaintops and preserved it through months of sandstorms. They built vaults to house frost and designed airflow systems before thermodynamics had a name. In some fringe communities, hidden villages along the Silk Road, elders still drop ice chips into rose sherbet on summer solstice, not to cool the drink, just to remember. Because memory, like ice, melts if not held carefully. Your thoughts drift to the first section of your journey, standing beneath that yakhchal dome with its ridged sides and shadowed interior. You recall the silence, the weight of centuries above your head, the way your breath fogged the air. And then there's you, walking down those spiral steps, opening your palm to press against the cool stone. What you didn't know then, but do now. You weren't just touching a wall, you were touching a promise passed from generation to generation. We will fight the sun, and we will win. Not with fire, but with wisdom, with clay, with shadows. You picture a young servant girl balancing ice wrapped in lamb's wool, on her shoulder, trekking across rock for days just to deliver a single chilled bottle of wine to a noble. She didn't do it because she had to. She did it because it mattered. And what about us? We tap a button, set a dial, toss half-melted ice into the sink and complain when the air conditioner makes noise. But perhaps, just perhaps, we've started listening again. Today, architects look back to yakhchal geometry for sustainable cooling. Engineers study Carnot gradients for passive irrigation. Urban designers mimic badgers to ventilate high-rises without machines. What's old is new again. What's buried is blooming. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of Yazd or Kashan, a grandmother still wakes before sunrise to pour syrup over crushed snow for her grandchildren, retrieved not from a freezer, but from a shadowed vault her father's father helped maintain. You lie still now, heavy with story. Cool air brushes your face. Whether it's real or memory, you can't quite tell, but it brings the scent of clay and cedar, mountain ice and fig leaves. You let yourself sink into it, because this, at last, is the gift of the Persian cold. Not just preservation, but peace. A moment suspended between heat and haste, where everything slows and silence carries meaning, where a single flake of ice tells an empire's worth of stories, and where you, just for tonight, are still part of it. And now, as your breathing softens and the edges of this story begin to fade, let the images you've gathered melt gently into dreams. The stone steps beneath your feet are long behind you. The domes, the tunnels, the wind towers, they've done their work. You're safe now, held, cradled in the cool stillness of history's embrace. You've walked with emperors and servants, trudged over frost-worn paths, under silver stars, and dipped your fingers into brine that once chilled the finest wines of the Achaemenid court. You've tasted the logic of civilizations carved not in marble, but in water and wind and shaded stone. And maybe, just maybe, you've carried a little of that wisdom back with you. So much of life is heat and motion, constant, demanding, loud. But here in this pocket of calm, you've learned that coolness is not just temperature, it's patience, it's thoughtfulness. It's learning how to slow down and listen, to let the wind speak through walls, to understand that every breath has a rhythm, and even the hottest moments contain the potential for quiet, for clarity, for cool. Let that thought settle over you now like a breeze at dusk. Let your muscles release their grip. Let your chest rise and fall like a Carnot current, slow, steady, ancient. You don't need to remember every dome, every date, every clever ear shaft or salt-dusted amphora. What matters is the feeling, that quiet awe, that soft gasp as you placed your palm against cold stone in the heat of summer and realized someone built this for you, long before they knew your name or even imagined a future where names would be recorded on glowing screens and stories would drift across oceans as whispers in the night. Let your eyes drift shut if they haven't already. You're not in a desert anymore. You're floating through a dreamscape of pale domes and starlit skies, cool shadows and the faint perfume of crushed mint and clay. You are safe. You are cool. You are still. And in this stillness, the world makes sense, just for a little while. So sleep now, dreamwalker. Let the frost cover the threshold of your thoughts. Let the yakhchals guard your rest like watchful, silent giants. And remember, in the hottest lands, even the smallest ice was treasure. Sweet dreams, and have a peaceful sleep.